Today we're going to be doing a fun, simple project that I think is a great gift idea. We're going to be making some hair berets or sliders. We're going to have a leaf design as well as a Viking knotwork design, so enjoy. As a lot of you guys already know, I put almost all of my patterns and artwork up on my Etsy shop. There'll be a link right here. Those same patterns and artwork are always on my Patreon month to month for a limited time. And hey, if you want to help support the channel even more, I've started designing some shirts. This is one of them here. Thanks. With Mother's Day right around the corner and the simplicity of this project, I think this is a perfect time to pick up some tools and give it a shot.
Well, we're going to have to get some artwork ready, so I'm going to sketch out a couple of designs here. The first one's going to be a Viking serpent. I do a lot of them, and it fits nicely into this confined space without being too complicated. I've got a lot of videos on drawing serpents and various artwork, so you can check those out if you want. I always tend to ink my drawings when I'm finished them, so I'm going to use these Faber-Castell pens that I really like and quickly go around all the lines. I really encourage people to try drawing their own artwork. It took me a long time to just go ahead and do it, but once you do it, it's really rewarding. So now once we've got all this done, we're going to go ahead and move on to the other piece of artwork. I was going to do a couple more leaves, but I decided to do a couple pieces of knotwork instead. That's kind of my deal. I wanted this knotwork to be a little more balanced, kind of like Celtic artwork. I always feel that Celtic artwork is a little more balanced than the Viking knotwork style. We've got just enough space to not be overly complicated, and make it look pretty nice, I think. You can really tell how simple this stuff is, you just have to have some patience, so I really encourage you guys to try it yourself. It's quite rewarding. So once we get through all this sketching, we're going to once again move on to our line work. I like to line everything, gives the project a nice finished look, and on top of that makes it a lot easier for me to transfer it into a digital image. Because if you just try and scan a pencil image into Photoshop and then try and make it digital, it's actually a pretty big pain in the butt, I've found out. So my process is definitely not a professional digital artist's process. I end up scanning my rough sketches with the line work done into Photoshop, and then I put them into Illustrator and make them a vector image, and then I bring them back into Photoshop and I clean them up. It's a little bit of an ordeal, but I'm getting the hang of it. I'm becoming a lot faster with it, so that gives me the ability to get more artwork to you guys. I'm pretty happy with this. It's really simple, but it doesn't have to be super complicated to look nice. We also all know, or at least most of us know, that leather carving takes forever, so the more complicated it is, the more you're going to be at a piece for hours and hours and hours. Complicated isn't necessarily better. Sometimes the simple projects with the nice clean lines end up looking better than those crazy busy projects. Now we're just sketching out a leaf, pretty simple. Everybody's seen a leaf. Of course, if you wanted to, you could be really specific with the kind of leaf that you wanted to use in your project. If you're doing this for a gift for somebody, maybe a certain kind of tree is their favorite tree, you know, something that means something to them specifically. Those little details are always really appreciated by people. Now we just get this all inked up, so it's an easy transfer into Photoshop and our tracing film. All of those look really nice, I think. They're all very unique. Now we're just going to transfer all these over to some leather. I get almost all my leather and supplies from LONSDALE leather. You can check them out here and in the link in the description. They're a great source for hardware, supplies, leather, tons of leather. I decided to do a couple leaves here because I wanted to do different colors. The leather I am using here is a 6-ounce Vegetan. Always make sure your blades are sharp. I motored through this stuff pretty good. I'm used to cutting a lot heavier at times. These little leaf edges are a lot of tiny little cuts, but I'm used to stuff that takes a while. This actually didn't take that long at all. It is the leaf, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. It doesn't even have to match your pattern spot on, honestly. It's a leaf. So we've got those cut out and it's time to bevel. I'm using a extra fine Pro Craft Tool beveler for the top. You can use a 1 or 2 if you want, it doesn't really matter. I was just keeping my bevels very light, and on the bottom I'm using a 1, so it's a little wider on the bottom. And I only beveled the very ends here of these leaves, because the rest is going to be a little difficult to get into. I just wet everything at once, let it dry for a bit, and then we're going to trace our lines on and get to carving. Obviously I've got a ton of videos on carving, specifically in a Viking style. You can check out the link here, and it'll go through the process a little more in depth. Make sure your tool's sharp. Always use a strop. I know people are going to have a fit. It's a ceramic blade, it doesn't need to be stropped. When you strop something, it polishes the item, so you're just removing imperfections. Maybe it's a little bit of leather that's on there, you never know. So stop thinking of it as sharpening and think of it as polishing. I decide just to background the inside of the knots here. That's something I do regularly. Come to think of it, I think it's time to get a different background stamp tool. I've been using this one for years. It's just what I've always used. I should experiment a bit more, so I gotta figure that out real soon. I'm going to shut up for a bit, you guys can watch the rest of this carving. I recommend watching the leaf carving specifically, because that's something that hasn't been seen on my channel before if you're not new here. But hey, maybe you just want to kick back and zone out to me carving some knotwork. Well, I thought I should mention this. So you can see I'm just rubbing back and forth over all my bevels. It's because usually when you do a bevel, there's more of a crisp edge, and I wanted it to be more rounded, so I just smoothed it out a little bit. There we go, nice and simple. Now we're moving on to backgrounding. I usually bevel first. There's no reason I didn't do it this time other than being forgetful. It's not a huge deal, but if you want a deeper background, you could bevel everything beforehand and then hate it with your backgrounder. Here I'm just backgrounding it, which is fine. But if I was in a leatherworking competition, which some of my subscribers have told me, you would bevel all the way around the edge first, even though you're already backgrounding that edge, so it's just a lot more work. Make sure your water is really even on this and that it's not too saturated, because otherwise you're going to mush it instead of stamping it. The leaf carving is kind of fun. You can experiment easily, you don't have to worry about your lines too much. All I did was cut all my main lines, and I cut them deep, not like crazy deep, just regular. I doubled up the center line, which is also on my pattern. And then after I get all these main lines done, I just hit it really lightly with my swivel knife to get that veiny look that a lot of leaves have. Going really light. And very random. You can see at the tip of this leaf I decided that I was going to try and dry it a little quicker because it was more saturated at the tip. It cooked it a bit. But something you can do is saturate your piece with water, hit it with a hairdryer or maybe a heat gun. I would be using a heat gun, and it'll curl everything up. So if you're doing leaves, you can get some kind of cool effects with water and heat. Now it's also going to make it pretty brittle, so be careful. You gotta find the happy medium. If I was making a perfect replica of a leaf in leather, I don't think I would bevel the flared out parts like that, but I think because of how it is affected with the dye and stain, it just makes it pop really nice, so I wasn't really too worried about it. Now I'm just smoothing everything out. I don't want to have any of those crisp edges. I think it's already looking pretty cool, and the distortion at the tip just adds to that look. This is some orange Angelus leather dye that I've had kicking around that I haven't been able to use recently, so I'm doing that, and then just a regular Phoebings green. So that's all the dyeing we really have to do to the leaves. With the knotwork pieces, I'm going to paint with dyes, which is a little tedious, but in the end it gives a good result. So you're just loading your brush with dye, making sure you don't drip on the parts that you don't want to dye, and transferring it over to your piece. I really don't drip on my piece very much, and it's not because I'm some kind of miracle worker. The dye doesn't really want to leave the brush. The thing you have to look out for is having too much dye on the brush, placing it on your piece and having it bleed into everything. So when I'm painting with the dyes, if I have a lot on the brush, I'll kind of put it off into a larger area and then go back to what I was doing. Now I'm just going to sand it up to make it pop even more, make it a little more leafy. I've got some pretty high grit sandpaper. I think it's like 800. Nothing super crazy, I guess, but higher than most people have. I'm going to use my spray gun and hit all these with 2 coats of neutral Resolene. I'm going to let it dry significantly in between. And once we're done that, we're going to use some antique gel on the sides, backs, and tops of these knotwork pieces. And then just on the top of the orange leaf. The reason I did that was because I was a little worried about the green leaf getting all weird looking. And the orange leaf is more, you know, fall. Could get some brown colors in there. It was more of an artistic choice than anything. Feel free to experiment, guys. Your leaves could be blue for all I care. Doing these leaves did give me some ideas for making some kind of elven shoulder armor with leather leaves on it. I think it might look pretty cool, but I've got a lot of projects to do. We'll see if I ever get around to it. Maybe one of you guys can take that idea and run with it and send me pictures. That'd be pretty cool, actually. I'm just smoothing out all my edges with a burnishing tool and beeswax. I don't smooth out the edges on the leaf. I'm using some chopsticks that I'm going to cut down as my hair stick. Now, I've put some hair sticks up on my Amazon storefront that you can grab if you want. There's some cool ones. I even put some hair sliders up there too because I thought they were kind of cool. There's some Viking ones I found that I didn't know existed. Obviously, I'm just hacksawing these down and then sanding the edges to make them look a little better. Once we've got this done, we just have to punch some holes in our pieces, and when we're doing that, we have to make sure that we remember that these sticks taper. One hole is going to be smaller than the other, and not to punch the holes too big. So you punch both holes with your smaller sizes, you test it, and then you increase the hole size just to make sure everything fits perfectly. So we've increased our hole size, and now our stick fits how we want it to fit, and we slide everything through. If all our chopsticks are the same size, now we know what we need to do for the hole sizing, and we can get everything else done. Putting a resist on the leaves darkens them up and removes a lot of that sanding that we did, but because this is a green healthy leaf, I decide to leave it. I go back over the orange leaf with the sandpaper because it's more of a fall leaf. It'll remove a little bit of your finish. You gotta decide how important that is to you. One thing my camera missed is putting a finish on the backside. Make sure you do that.
Well, those turned out great. Hopefully that gives you the confidence to give it a shot. You can find multiple leaves plus that Viking knotwork all in one pattern pack on my Etsy shop, and for a limited time also on my Patreon. And until next time, keep on being creative in whatever it is you do.